goods and services into the international marketplace. And we do that through our presence overseas, as I said. And so with that, just so that you understand who I am, who I work for with the Department of Commerce, we want to help you in terms of the financial technology industry sector, helping you get into the international marketplace. So that being said, let me introduce my prestigious panel here of guest speakers. I'm going to start with Ursula, Amanda, Rojas, Weiser, with the Mexican government. She's based in San Francisco out of the Mexican Consulate. She and I have been working with each other for some time now as part of her rotation in the San Francisco Consulate. And then I'm going to move on to a colleague of mine that have come out all the way from Washington, D.C., Doreen, Parikh. She works also, like me, for the International Trade Administration. She's an international trade specialist, like myself, and she is a fintech guru, and so that's why she's come all the way out from D.C. here to join us today. Third panelist is with the Canadian government, although she was born in Paris, Anne-Marie Roussel, and she works in the Canadian government Silicon Valley office as an international trade officer. We call ourselves within the U.S. government here as international trade specialists. She's an international trade officer. And so what I'd like to do is say, with this natural panel of the three, U.S., Mexico, and Canada speakers, we really can't get into the NAFTA 2.0 that just got passed, the USMCA, because it's so new that we can't really officially talk about it. But what we will talk about as panelists is the fintech sector in our respective countries. And so I'll start with, let me just check to see who I'll pick on first. Mexico, since you're first in line here. So Mexico has taken a pretty progressive stance in the fintech sector. And I want to ask Ursula, you enacted some legislation as it relates to fintech. Can you talk about that legislation?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for allowing me to share this information with you. So Mexico, it's among the first countries to really enact and legislated new fintech law that was just published in September 2018. It was negotiated with the participation of the private sector and the key leaders of the industry. It's a very innovative legislation, I believe, the first in Latin America, at least to, for example, define cryptocurrencies. I think it's important to clarify that it doesn't regulate the whole fintech sector. It just regulates two very specific areas, which are, one is the e-money platforms, or e-wallets, called electronic payment funds institutions, and the crowdfunding platforms. So that would be the two kind of areas that the fintech law covers. Also, I think it's interesting is the first law that addresses cryptocurrencies, that defines cryptocurrencies, and in coordination with our central bank, it will create another set of rules next year and the following years about what are the cryptocurrencies that will be allowed to be used over there. So I think it really sets the platform for the fintech sector, which is already booming in Mexico, to keep growing.
All right, thank you very much, Ursula. I'll come back to you with another follow-on question, by the way. I'm going to move on to my colleague here from the Department of Commerce and ask her about what are the priority countries for the U.S. In the area of fintech.
Sure. Thanks, Rod. And thanks to Patty and the iValley team for this opportunity. And thanks, Rod, for coordinating with us. It's always nice to get out of DC and actually to meet and with the companies and just to get out of our bubble. So definitely appreciate the opportunity. We are definitely working with our partners across the globe to identify opportunities for U.S. fintech firms. Working closely with the Singapore Monetary Authority. They are hosting the Singapore Fintech Festival the week of November 12th. I know many of you in this room have attended in the past. I think they expect over 30,000 participants from over, I think in 2017, there were over 109 countries represented. So it's really a great platform to meet and network and find some potential opportunities. My Deputy Assistant Secretary, Jim Sullivan, will be leading the U.S. delegation. He's actually speaking on a panel that will focus on blockchain opportunities and challenges, along with senior representatives and CEOs from Ripple, Hyperledger, the Ethereum Foundation. So that will be a really great event, and I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for the United States to be part of this. Also, another market that might be of interest to some of you would be Taiwan. In January of this year, Taiwan established a FinTech Innovation Park, which includes a digital sandbox, and they established a FinTech Development and Innovative Center to implement FinTech innovative experimentation. Taiwan is actually the first country in the world to have such a mechanism written into law, and US companies are, of course, welcome to apply. And one more country that I wanted to mention is India. Rod and my colleagues in the US Commercial Service are planning a great event called TradeWinds Indo-Pacific Forum and Mission in May of next year. And our team will lead US companies to the region so that they can make important industry contacts, gain some market insights, and solidify business opportunities. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to reach out to Rod or myself. We'd be happy to connect you to the right people. And then also, I did want to mention that, when you are looking to export your services or products abroad, there may be some challenges that you may encounter, and especially in this sector. It could include data localization requirements or limits on foreign direct investments, or maybe some discriminatory policies that favor domestic companies over US firms. And if you do encounter those situations, please feel free to reach out to Rod or myself as we work closely with our folks on the ground and with officials so that we can try to help work out and find a solution for everyone. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Doreen. Last year, Patty Ramanathan with iValley did go to the FinTech Festival. So he participated in that, and our embassy in Singapore is really behind that trade event that's taking place, coming up actually quite quickly in Singapore. I also wanted to just reference a trade event that just took place in September called FinTech Americas. It took place in Miami Beach, Florida, and that is another event that the audience should be aware of in terms of if you have any interest in the Americas and in the fintech sector. That takes place, I believe, every year. Anyway, our office in Miami was involved in that FinTech Americas trade event that took place in September. My colleague referenced Taiwan. We just had a delegation come through from Taiwan. Matthew Quigley, one of our foreign service officers, brought a delegation, a FinTech delegation from Taiwan that was just literally here last week. And so they are aggressively engaging us here in the FinTech sector in Taiwan. I'm glad she mentioned TradeWinds, which is this big trade mission coming up to India in May of 2019, because I'm going to try and twist Patty's arm to participate in that trade mission. They do want to have a FinTech element to this high-profile trade mission. And so let me now move on to Canada. And one thing I just learned from Anne-Marie is that Canada is developing innovation centers as it relates to the fintech sector. So I was going to ask her, can you share with the audience this strategic play here in terms of the development of the fintech sector in Canada?
Glad to. And thanks for inviting me on this panel. I appreciate it.
C'est mon plaisir.
Merci. You're right, Rod. We have, Canada is very interesting in the way it's organizing the next generation of financial services and fintech. We have centers of excellence. We've basically organized around 4 poles. The main pole is Toronto. Toronto is now ranked as one of the top 5 fintech cities in the world, along with Singapore, London, Zurich, New York. So Toronto is right up there. For various reasons, we've had, of course, there's a very strong financial service, historically, culture in Canada with the 5 big banks that we have there. So it's historical, but it's also quite a bit of innovation. Toronto has a number of accelerators. Mars is one of the main ones, and then we have the DMZ at the university, Ryerson University, and then we have the Creative Destruction Lab, I love that name, at Waterloo in Toronto, Waterloo University. So we have quite a bit of activity around innovation in all of Toronto. You probably all know a company called Shopify, little company. It came from Toronto, and it's part of that sort of very active ecosystem. The second one, I'm going in terms of size, Toronto is by far the biggest. Then we have Vancouver. Vancouver is extremely active as well, and most of it, or a lot of it, is due to a very innovative bank there, Vance City, that is putting a lot of venture money into very early stage to late stage companies there. We've had a few successes out of Vancouver, like Trulio. And then Montreal is another big center of talent and innovation. A big company like Blockstream came out of Montreal, and a number of accelerators there. Calgary is also less known, perhaps, although Rod knows it well because you went to school there. But it's very active. We have a very active accelerator there called Innovate Calgary, and very focused on fintech, attracting a lot of talent. We have a lot of AI and machine learning and blockchain talent in Calgary. And I know a number of US companies, US banks that are actually looking to Calgary to set up either their innovation teams or whatever, because we do have this huge pool of talent that is a lot less expensive than what you pay in Silicon Valley, among other places. And also, it's easier to retain people because the culture is not quite the same as, jumping from one company to another. Calgary is still a small ecosystem, so full of talent. So a company that came out of Calgary that you might have heard about in the paycheck platform area is Zayzoon. So I think that gives you a bit of an overview of the centers of excellence. Of course, we might go into regulatory issues, like my colleague from Mexico. I was interested to hear what you said, because in Canada, I think it's a bit of the barrier is the regulatory environment. The regulatory environment has been made for the 5 big banks, and it's taking a bit of time for smaller players to deal with that and sort of get the regulatory framework changed and upgraded, which the government is in the process of doing. The government, as you may know, is very innovation-minded. So we are upgrading all this, but it takes a long time, especially when you have such big players that are, not just big players in Canada, but on the international scene. So there we go.
Merci pour ça. All right, thank you. Let me go back this way here. I'm going to ask Doreen to talk a little bit about what the U.S. government is doing relating to blockchain technology.
Sure, thank you. And just to reiterate what Rod said earlier, Department of Commerce is not a regulator. I'm not SEC, I'm not OCC or anything else.
And we
are-
don't make $250,000 a year.
I
don't
definitely
know
do not,
who
but I
gets
may
that
want
kind
that
of-
job next
Yeah.
time round. But that said, we are in the International Trade Administration, so of course we are closely following what our regulators doing as it impacts U.S. exports abroad. So I know there were some questions about regulations for the fintech sector from the earlier panels. So I did want to flag one report that was released in July and one upcoming report that will actually set the scene for financial technology. On July 31st, the Treasury Department released a very long report on fintech policy, which basically called for a more agile and conducive regulatory approach to innovations in the fintech sector. It laid out clearly how this technology is transforming the financial services and creating new opportunities for both large and small companies. And it also makes several recommendations about changes that are necessary for the financial regulatory framework. And this includes allowing for a national banking charter for fintech companies, creating a regulatory sandbox. And again, those are recommendations. They have not been put into place yet. And then we also expect another report coming out in the next few months by the Financial Stability Oversight Council. And this will not just be on blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but also for the great majority of fintech, including lending, payments, settlement, and wealth management. So that will also be very telling about what opportunities there are and the regulations that revolve around that. I know one of my team's major priorities is to actually get a hold and to study more about what companies are doing in the financial technology space. It's clear that blockchain technology is transforming everything from healthcare to supply chains to trade finance to identity management. So we acknowledge that and we realize that, but we are still trying to get a grasp on it. We are also working closely with the European Commission. They've established a blockchain observatory with, I believe the budget is about 200 million euros. So we have a joint agreement with them to do some research and development on blockchain. And I also wanted to highlight that a part of the Commerce Department is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They've just finalized a report on blockchain for business, which is available on their website. And we see that this is such an important space that we've actually developed an internal working group on blockchain technologies so that we can make sure that we are speaking with one voice when this comes about. And, you know, we look forward to hearing more about what you all are doing in the, real-time blockchain. So I welcome any discussions after this panel. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Doreen. I'm going to mention one other U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service trade mission